So yesterday, the news came out. I'm recording this on Sunday, December 15th. Yesterday, Saturday, news came out that ABC News and George Stephanopoulos, including the cooperation of ABC News' parent company, Disney, agreed to settle a defamation lawsuit that had been brought against George Stephanopoulos and ABC News by Donald Trump. And ABC News agreed to settle this case for $16 million. And in this video, I am going to go through in a methodical nature and demonstrate to everyone why that is nothing more than a obeying in advance payoff to Donald Trump as the incoming president. It makes absolutely no sense within the context of civil litigation of a defamation lawsuit. It's something that if I, in my professional capacity as someone who has been a trial attorney, a licensed practicing trial attorney for almost 26 years, if I did something like this on behalf of a client, I would likely get disbarred. I think that this settlement is disingenuous, borderline unethical, and again, it is just a flat out payoff by a news corporation and the Disney Corporation to an incoming president who has said that a centerpiece of his incoming administration is going to be going after the media. So let's dive in. And I wanted to start out by saying, I did a TikTok about this morning. This has been quite a week, and yesterday was quite a day. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg pay $1 million to Donald Trump. We've seen Jeff Bezos pay $1 million to Donald Trump. We've seen Tim Cook had dinner with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago on Friday. Sam Altman from OpenAI paid Donald Trump $1 million. They're paying all of this money into his inauguration fund, which is unregulated. It has no reporting requirements. Donald Trump can do whatever the hell Donald Trump wants to do with that money. He can do whatever he wants to with it. And we are seeing, and now we get news yesterday that ABC News is paying him $16 million within the context of a civil lawsuit, which is the perfect vehicle to make this kind of a payoff. When it is not supported by the law, in this case, it is not supported by the facts. ABC News would have won this lawsuit if they had litigated it. They would have won this lawsuit if they would have litigated it. And instead, they chose to use the context of this case, the pretext, to funnel a payment of $16 million to the incoming president of the United States. But we've spent this entire week watching money and power in this country capitulate to Donald Trump over and over and over and over again, capped off with what ABC News yesterday, breaking the first rule of the 20 rules on tyranny by Timothy Snyder: do not obey in advance. They are obeying in advance. Trump's not even going to be in office for another 5 weeks. And they are obeying in advance. All right. So let's dive into the litigation aspect of this lawsuit. Donald Trump sued George Stephanopoulos and ABC News for defamation. The claim is that George Stephanopoulos defamed Donald Trump on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, one of the Sunday morning news shows, back in March of this year, 2024, during an interview that he had, a very contentious interview that he had with Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace was recounting her experience as someone who survived a sexual assault while she served in the military. And George Stephanopoulos said, how do you square that with your endorsement of Donald Trump, who has been found liable for rape? Two things real quick. This lawsuit that we're talking about is a civil lawsuit. When George Stephanopoulos said Donald Trump had been found liable for rape, what was he referring to? He was referring to the first, also civil lawsuit that Carroll had filed against Donald Trump that was resolved in 2023, I think, where the jury found Donald Trump liable for sexual abuse. They did not find him liable for rape, and they ordered Donald Trump to pay E. Jean Carroll $5 million. Donald Trump was never charged criminally for what he was alleged to have done to E. Jean Carroll. New York State, and it was 30 years ago that this happened. A couple years ago, New York State removed the statutes of limitation on civil claims for sexual abuse cases while leaving the statutes of limitations for criminal prosecutions of those cases in place, meaning that cases where allegations of sexual assault or rape had occurred, but the criminal statute of limitations and the civil statute of limitations had long since lapsed. The New York State legislature, largely as a result of Catholic priests' sexual abuse claims, reopened the statute of limitations for civil cases, meaning victims could sue their alleged abusers, but those abusers would not be prosecuted criminally. And it was within the context of that E. Jean Carroll sued Donald Trump for rape and defamation. And as I said, the jury found him liable for sexual abuse. They did not find him liable for rape, and they found him liable for defamation. Now, in criminal cases, think scales of justice. The burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest burden that exists in the law. Because you're trying to take away someone's freedom, you're trying to put them in prison. In civil cases where you're largely just fighting about money, go back to the scales, the burden of proof is more likely than not 51%. You don't have that high burden in a criminal case that you have in a civil case. You don't have the high burden that you have in a criminal case. Also, in criminal cases, the jury verdict has to be unanimous. If it's an acquittal, it has to be everybody. If it's a conviction, it has to be anybody. If there's no unanimous verdict, it's a hung jury. It's a mistrial. In civil cases, you do not need to have a unanimous jury. You can get 9 out of 12. So you could have 3 people on the jury here like, I don't think they proved their case. If you get 9, the plaintiff still wins. Because you're dealing with that lower burden of proof and because you're not trying to take away someone's personal freedom. So, Trump sued George Stephanopoulos and ABC News because on air 10 times during this interview, George Stephanopoulos said that Donald Trump was found liable for rape, and Donald Trump sued him for defamation. In the state of New York, what is the cause of action for defamation? There are 4 prongs to it, and then there's an added thing that we'll talk about. The plaintiff, Donald Trump, has to show that a statement was made that was false, that it was published to a third person, that it harmed his reputation, and that it was about him specifically. Let's break that down. We'll take the last 3 first. George Stephanopoulos' statement was made on national television, so it was published to a third party. Donald Trump claims that statement that Donald Trump was found liable for rape was defamatory towards him and harmed his reputation. At the time George Stephanopoulos made that claim or made that statement, I think at that time Donald Trump was on trial in Manhattan on 34 felony counts for having had sex with Stormy Daniels and the other woman's name was McDougal, the former Playboy model. He paid them each $120,000. He was convicted on those charges by a jury, but he also had pending something like 20 or 25 civil lawsuits against him, which were publicly known for sexual assault and sexual harassment. So it's arguable whether George Stephanopoulos saying that on air would have harmed Donald Trump's reputation. The last prong is that the statement was about Donald Trump specifically. George Stephanopoulos identified Donald Trump by name. But let's go back to the first prong. The statement made must have been proven false. The statement was Donald Trump was found liable for rape. And as I mentioned, the jury in the E. Jean Carroll case found Donald Trump liable for sexual abuse. They did not choose to find him liable for rape. However, in post-trial motions filed by Donald Trump's attorneys, the judge in the case, Judge Kaplan, wrote in one of his opinions, one of his orders, that the jury, because in a jury trial, the jury determines what the facts are, and then the judge applies the law. But determining what are the facts of a case is solely the area of the jury, because they hear the evidence, they hear, see, watch the witnesses testify, they judge the witnesses' credibility, they see the documents, they decide what's relevant, they decide what's not. And the judge makes rulings throughout the case on objections and evidence and things like that. So in post-trial motions, the Judge Kaplan, adjudicated that Donald Trump, his conduct that the jury determined had factually occurred, fit within the rape statute, and that the jury had indeed found him liable for rape, as that word is commonly understood. He wrote, the finding that Ms. Carroll failed to prove that she was raped within the meaning of the New York penal law, the criminal code, does not mean that she failed to prove that Mr. Trump raped her, as many people commonly understand the word rape. Indeed, as the evidence at trial recounted below makes clear, the jury found that Mr. Trump, in fact, did exactly that he had raped her. So a New York judge, in an order, in an opinion, had said this jury determined that Donald Trump raped E. Jean Carroll and found him liable for rape. That's a statement from a New York judge. So let's go back to that first prong of defamation, that a statement was made and that statement was false. That statement that Donald Trump was found liable for rape, made on national television by George Stephanopoulos, is demonstrably true and accurate, as backed up by a New York judge who sat through that trial. So Donald Trump, as a matter of law, is not able to prove the first prong of defamation. If ABC News had litigated this case, they would have won. Because again, bear in mind, in criminal case, your burden of proof is this. In a civil case, it's this. And you don't need to have a unanimous jury. There is no possible way that Donald Trump would have won this case. There isn't. It probably would have been thrown out on a motion for summary adjudication or a motion for summary judgment filed by George Stephanopoulos and ABC News. There is no way under the law that Donald Trump would have won this case. And I'm saying this as someone who's been trying these kinds of cases for almost 26 years and has been a civil litigator, a trial attorney for almost 26 years. I've done 2 jury trials within the last 18 months. Second, it was interesting, the timing of this, because there was a news story last week that both Donald Trump and George Stephanopoulos were ordered to sit for their depositions this coming week for 4 hours apiece. What does that mean? Anytime you file a civil lawsuit like this, both sides get to engage in what's called discovery. The first phase of discovery is just an exchange of information between the sides. The first phase of discovery is written. Each side sends written questions, interrogatories to the other side that the other side has to answer under oath. You get to demand documents. You get to do things like requests for admission, admit this fact, admit this fact, admit this fact. All of that has to be responded to under oath. Typically, once the written phase of discovery is done, then you move on to depositions. And this case was brought by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has the burden of proof. Donald Trump has to prove all 4 prongs of defamation. And also in this case, there's a heightened standard the United States Supreme Court, the Sullivan case, New York Times, because Donald Trump is a public figure, he also has to prove that George Stephanopoulos acted with actual malice to him, as opposed to saying something, well, I heard something or whatever. Donald Trump has to prove George Stephanopoulos' mental state, his intent to harm Donald Trump, that he said this thing. Donald Trump was found liable for rape, specifically for the purpose of harming Donald Trump. That's a heightened level of proof on public figures. And you can't prove that when you can't even prove that the statement itself was false, because the statement is true. We've all heard the saying that truth is an absolute defense to defamation. The truth here is that what George Stephanopoulos said was demonstrably true. And in his deposition, Donald Trump, that's his opportunity to prove his case. A deposition is you're in an informal setting, but the person who's being deposed is under oath. There's a court reporter, and that would have been ABC News' attorney's opportunity to question Donald Trump under oath. Remember that when New York Attorney General Letitia James deposed Donald Trump in the lawsuit, the fraud lawsuit that she brought against him, she deposed him for 8 hours. He asserted his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination over 500 times, 400 times, something like that. I think it was 400. So ABC News, their attorneys, hadn't even begun to collect evidence in this case, evidence which might prove or disprove Donald Trump's claims of defamation. ABC News did not have enough information. Their attorneys did not have enough information to agree to this settlement in this amount at this stage of the case. They hadn't even taken this deposition yet. Settling a case this big for that amount of money before you have even deposed the plaintiff is malpractice, in my opinion. If I did that, I would probably get disbarred in the state of California. Amazing. A lot of times in these kinds of cases, you'll hear defendants say, well, it's like, even though I did nothing wrong, I just wanted to settle the case. So, we gave them a nuisance settlement. If someone sues you for $1 million and they agree to accept a payment of $25,000, that's a nuisance settlement, because it will cost a defendant more than $25,000 to defend the case, to get to a point where they win. If you go to a trial can cost $200,000, $300,000, a small one. So this is most definitely not a nuisance settlement, because it would not have cost ABC News $16 million to litigate this case. There's no universe in which that would have happened. So they hadn't gathered enough evidence to make this decision. They hadn't even bothered taking the deposition of the plaintiff. It was not going to cost them a tenth of this amount to litigate and successfully defend this case. They would have won this case if they had actually litigated it through trial, because Donald Trump couldn't prove that this statement was false. It's factually correct. It's true. It's in a court record that this statement is true. And so, but yesterday, ABC News agreed to a $16 million settlement. $1 million paid to Trump's attorneys, because his super PAC that was paying his legal fees is dried up. There's no money left in it. So that's a payment that directly benefits Donald Trump, because that's money that he owed. The other $15 million ABC News has agreed to pay towards a presidential library or a foundation set up by or for Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump is barred for life from running a foundation. Why is that? Well, in 2019, Trump was fined $2 million for misusing his charity foundation. He was sued by Letitia James, the state of New York. He misused his charitable foundation to further his political and business interests. Among other things, Trump acknowledged that he allowed his presidential staff to campaign or to coordinate with the foundation regarding fundraisers. The president admitted, among other things, to arranging the charity pay $10,000 for a 6-foot portrait of him. He paid that back. He used that money for sports memorabilia, for champagne at a charity gala. He admitted to redirecting $100,000 in foundation money used to settle claims over an 80-foot flagpole. The foundation paid $158,000 to resolve a lawsuit over the prize in a hole-in-one contest at one of Trump's golf courses. And remember that his sons had taken money from a charity that was designed, the money was designed to go to children with cancer. And so as part of this lawsuit in 2019, Donald Trump had to pay $2 million in fines for misusing his charity, and he was barred for life from ever running a foundation again. His kids were only barred for 2 or 3 years from running foundations. And so why did ABC News do this? Because Donald Trump has said that going after the media, he's been saying for 8 years, the media are the enemy of the people. And he has said explicitly, I'm going to appoint an attorney general and a director of the FBI, and we're going to go after the media. And his incoming FBI director pick, Kash Patel, has asserted on multiple occasions how he would handle reporters if he were put in power. We're going to come after the people in the media who lied to American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. Whether it's criminally or civilly, we'll figure it out, but we're coming after you. Considering all of these factors, this $16 million, and Disney has had their own problems in Florida with Ron DeSantis. Republican, Trump ally now. Disney is ABC News' parent corporation. ABC News is a nationwide news organization. Disney is also a media company, and they are giving this incoming president a payoff of $16 million that is not justified by the facts of this case, the civil case, the defamation case. It's not justified by the law in the defamation case. It's not justified by the cost to litigate this case. And it's a case that if ABC News litigated it, they would win. They would absolutely win. And they're paying Trump $16 million anyway, when it would cost them less than 10% of that to win this case outright. There is no other way to look at this payment as anything other than a payoff from ABC News and Disney to the incoming president. Further capitulation by the 1%, the corporate class, the money, the power in this company, out of fear because they don't want to get prosecuted by Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, his incoming AG, and Kash Patel. And it's disgusting. It is disgusting. And this, and what we see the 1% having done over the last couple of weeks, that is the process by how we are losing democracy in the United States of America. George Stephanopoulos claims to be a journalist. He claims to be an ethical, principled journalist. And he is smart enough to understand every single thing that I have said in this video. So we'll see if he capitulates too. If I were him, I would have resigned immediately and gone on whatever cable news show would have had me on first and screamed at the top of my lungs that this is wrong. So we'll see what George does. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our page, give us a like, and leave something in the comments. Thank you. Be safe. I'm frightened for this nation. Legitimately.